Is author J.A. Freeman, and I'm picking up where I left off. This is going to be a reading of the first possibly three chapters of my solar science fiction novel called Solar Nemesis Alpha. This is chapter 2 called Universal Eschatology, and I'm going to get started now reading. So let's see what we can do, and hopefully you will follow along with me and support my book. Chapter 2 Universal Eschatology. Hope I'm saying that right. In a distant quadrant of space, a binary star system illuminates and heats four celestial bodies it hosts. The primary star is a young May-Sequence star called Tempest for its rough solar winds, agitated by its small, speedy red dwarf partner Zephyr. Out of its four bodies, two are distant gas giants. One is a barren rock in a decaying orbit with Tempest called Quietus, and one resides firmly within the system's habitable zone. The planet is filled with vast oceans, three sprawling continents containing a multitude of fresh and saltwater lakes teeming with organic life. This planet is called Harvest, and is the first settlement of a habitable exoplanet by mankind since the age of Earth exodus began. Harvest is the human translation for Phiomayim, the home world of the indigenous Phoenicians, an intelligent and relatively advanced alien race that was quite supportive of human settlement, and thus far, the two races have not engaged in any major conflicts. The Phoenicians are mainly a matriarchal and agrarian society, and humanity, despite desperately needing food throughout their colonies, brokered a deal for a vast area of farmland in exchange for technological education and equipment which they provided in the form of a Tetrad Corporation headquarters. With humanity's aid, the Phoenicians leapt into the spacefaring age. While Harvest has many natural wonders, along with ancient and modern Phoenician-built architectures, only one site on this planet concerns the very fate of the universe itself. That site is restricted to a young woman reclining in a pool chair near a beautiful lake. Though a sporadic breeze swished along with the scent of springtime and indigenous birds and insects chirped, buzzed, and flew about, Joanna Lovell was engrossed in a book oblivious to nature's symphony. She is reading from a textbook called Universal Eschatology, written by an alien of an unknown species named Sa Alair Ober. Her brown fingers flipped the page, and her green eyes focused on every word with a tight brow, and for once wasn't drowsy or bored, but genuinely intrigued. Her friend Solomon introduced her to the subject after being referred to the class during a session with a military psychologist. He was now landing his hovercar into her mansion's rooftop garage and descending from the third level to the rear ground to speak with her. Solomon is a black male in his mid-20s, strong build with brown eyes, black hair, and brown skin. Dressed in a blue athletic shirt with a long-sleeved white shirt on top and blue denim jeans, he was looking longingly at the clean, clear pool waters as he walked around it, wishing to go for a swim. As he searched for Joanna and found her, he wondered why she would ignore the pool for the lake teeming with all manner of alien insects and aquatic organisms. He picked up a pool chair and carried it with him as he walked towards her. As he approached, he was delighted to find that she was not only completely engrossed in his textbook, but that she was also sunbathing topless. She was his best friend since grade school, and once said their platonic friendship made her a bit uneasy, but never told him why. Because of that, he loved embarrassing her by pretending to be attracted to her, which wasn't hard at all since he had a lifelong crush on her and was eager to see her reaction when he presented himself. He made sure that he got a peek at her nakedness before sitting his chair down loud that startled her aplenty. "Oh God, Solomon, what are you doing scaring me like that?" She said, pressing the book against her chest before reaching for a towel to cover up. "I told you I was coming over to get my textbook. Class starts in 30 minutes. May I have it back now?" She threw the book at him from underneath the towel. "Interesting subject, huh? Seeing as how you didn't hear or see me arrive. So what did you think of Professor Ober's book?" said Solomon. He smiled as he surveyed her short and tapered blonde hair, caramel skin, and mahogany-colored lips covering her white teeth. But it was her rare green eyes that always drew his attention, and she often had to tell him to not stare to bring his attention back to their conversation. Don't stare, said Joanna. Sorry, said Solomon. I wouldn't consider Ober's book therapy for what you were referred to as class for. What was it again? Perversion and chronic peeping Tom syndrome? Joanna said bitterly. War-induced traumatic stress, Solomon corrected. You wouldn't need that class if you'd listened to me and became an engineer like I told you to, but no. You had to get in the line of fire. Pew, 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 rat-tat-tat-tat-tat, said Joanna, using her hands to pretend to shoot with an assault rifle. I thought being a soldier might impress you. I thought after a long tour, maybe Joanna will see me looking dapper in my uniform and realize I'm the man of her dreams. You dashed at hope when you called me, what was it again? Space idiot, said Solomon laughing, recalling Joanna's words. Stellar jarhead, and that represents you perfectly, Space Marine. I knew the HDN would throw you on the front lines, but you had to impress me. Tuh, you had me worried sick. So where you joined up to, said Solomon cynically. As a military cryptanalyst, the human diaspora Navy stationed me in a safe environment far from bullets whizzing by and fanatical Venusian warriors trying to protect their home. I succeeded in getting your orders changed a couple of times to get you out of the fray until they caught wind of it. Seriously, Solomon said, I'm surprised they didn't court-martial you for that. I guess they expected it since they let you enlist even though you're an infamous convicted felon. I always wondered why they made an exception for you. A lot of rules are bent or broken in wartime. They let me enlist because they needed my technical and computer expertise, and they couldn't prosecute me for everything I did because I covered my tracks. Their scientists were unable to keep up with the Venusian codes or even read half the non-coded information they recovered because they couldn't figure out how their devices worked. And yet you did. How exactly did you decipher an Venusian whisper box? Humans are all computers and circuitry these days. Aliens have different means of communication and created technology based on those methods. Venusians communicated with temperature variances, psychrometric impressions, and ultrasonic wavelengths. They sealed their ice shards and whisper boxes with those safeguards. Our teams had training in those arts which I used to unlock their hidden contents and deciphered their coded messages. That was the easy part once we realized that their whisper boxes carried psychometric cryptographic keys. Word around base was you managed to decipher their devices, not a team or a group of scientists. You. When and where did you receive that training? I'll keep that as a secret for now. You've got your book, now run along so I can change. You've got plans to go somewhere? I plan on going grocery shopping and staying home relaxed before I start my new job tomorrow. Where? I'd rather not say because I'll send you into a preaching tizzy. If it's not too much of a distraction, I'd like you to come along to class. Professor Ober is giving a lecture today. Sarcastically, Joanna said, sitting in Ober's lecture isn't my idea of relaxing, and the ultimate fate of the universe isn't exactly timely news since none of us will be around billions of years into the future when his lessons will matter. The only concept that was intriguing was the mechanism he described for using wormholes to access a different universe. What about being able to manipulate stellar and dark energies to change the fate of the universe, said Solomon. Pure fantasy. If ever there was an intelligent race that was capable of pulling off such a feat, we would have heard about them by now. No doubt every alien race in the universe would try to wrestle such knowledge from them and make their own decisions in regards to what Ober called the 5 fates. You may be right about that, but for some reason I get the feeling Ober isn't speculating, but teaching from experience like he's lived this, Solomon said, raising the book. What species is he again? No one knows. I've never seen an alien like him before, which makes me wonder whether or not he's a member of the advanced alien race in his book. Oh no, said Joanna, turning in her pool chair to sit up and face Solomon. What? He said as Joanna stared into his eyes for once. Don't tell me you become a disciple. He hasn't brainwashed you, has he? Brainwashing isn't possible on jarheads. We don't have brains, according to you. Listen, Joe, I've got to get going. Come judge for yourself whether or not I should continue attending his class, and I promise I'll heed your advice. You mean you'll actually do what I suggest for once? No strings attached? None whatsoever. If you say quit this class, I'll quit. I'll be ready in 5, said Joanna as she hurried back inside with her towel wrapped around her torso. Flying into the Phoenician city of Oahu, Joanna observed the impressive architecture that was dominated by hexagonal shapes and skyscrapers built out of an advanced hypergraphene material, making them extremely strong and unlikely to be damaged by natural forces. The Phoenicians employed the use of obelisks and spires in much of their designs and enjoyed erecting towering statues of historically important Phoenicians about their cities. Phoenicians often segmented their buildings, with some being entirely free floating structures held aloft by opposing magnetic forces and held in place by their sheer weight and stabilizing force fields. It was also common to see massive interlocking sections of a building disconnect and transport itself to another structure before seemingly fastening itself in as if it had been there all along. Amongst the great buildings of Bahai, there was much greenery, from planted trees on the ground to entire gardens draping from some of the most professional businesses in the city. While Solomon guided his car down the condensed traffic and imposing skyscrapers, Joanna scanned over his driver's license attached to his dash. In this time, a driver's license was one of 2 ways vehicles would activate, with the other being the driver's biometric data. Though vehicles could still be stolen with sophisticated fake identification, kidnapping the owner, or hacking the vehicle's biometric database, this newer method was responsible for near record low levels of car thefts throughout human colonial space. Joanna read his license information aloud to break the silence they had been driving in since leaving her house. Solomon Alexander Caldone, 26-year-old male, war veteran, organ donor, brown eyes, black hair, 6'2", and no points deducted for infractions. Good job, Mr. Caldone. Let's see who you allow to drive your car. She accessed his car's console to see a list of authorized users and read aloud, your sister Alexis Caldone and Joanna Lovell. When she blushed, Solomon saw it out of his peripheral vision and said, the only women in my life are allowed to drive my car. Joanna knew that Alexis could never drive his car due to her medical condition, but her biometrics had already been inputted. She knew that Solomon often had to take her around town for appointments, but when that wasn't possible, others would drive Alexis for him on a conditional and emergency basis with her permission. Solomon said, enter your data while you're here. Solomon pressed the biometric button on his car, and a small panel on the passenger dash rose up. The panel scanner emitted a light, and the car's artificial intelligence began instructing Joanna, scanning eyes, facial shapes, skeletal structure, and bone density. Dental scan. Turn head right. Joanna turned her head, and the AI continued. Ear-shaped scan. Turn head left. Once it finished, it said, clutch your chair's armrest with your fingers. Joanna did and felt a tiny prick on her middle fingers, followed by a gel to quickly heal the blood sample it took. The AI continued. Swill type scanned. Blood type O positive. Wait. Mute, said Joanna, which made Solomon chuckle. I've been a bit carefree with the Phoenician seafood lately, said Joanna bashfully. The center console screen displayed Joanna's picture and information with a new user confirmed message, obscuring much of the data, denying Solomon's chance to see just how carefree Joanna had been with her seafood intake. How's your sister? I haven't heard from her in a while, said Joanna. Solomon said her conditions worsened. She's going to be staying with me since my schedule at the farm allows me to take better care of her. I thank you so much for buying that hover chair. ALS is such a crippling disease. Ever since our mutually despised conglomerate pioneered a treatment, Alexis has been playing the lottery, hoping to afford it. I heard rumor they'd occasionally do charity cases, but I doubt she'd be so lucky in either case. While flying through the cityscape, Joanna caught sight of a holo screen broadcasting a tribal advertisement. She turned the radio to a band that allowed them to hear the exterior broadcast. The advertisement was advocating Phaeocian exploration of human colonies and encouraging their citizens to find the first exoplanet to meet their race's habitability needs. The screen flashed images of humanity's colonies as proof of their species' continued existence despite the volcanic extinction level event that struck their homeworld before playing footage of a devastated Earth. Solomon was born on the planet Shangri-La, and his family moved to Harvest when he was only 4 years old, while Joanna had lived on Harvest all her life. Neither had ever been to Earth, and she didn't have any desire to travel there, but wondered about Solomon. Excuse me for just a moment. I wrote here that Solomon was born on planet Shangri-La. That is supposed to be right. But on my first chapter, I said that he was actually born on Harvest, which is not correct. So I do have to change that later. Ever think of traveling to Earth to see where our race crawled out from primordial soup, said Joanna. Earth's no soup kitchen, Joe. And intelligent life wasn't created by random ingredients thrown in a pot with a little heat and lightning. Intelligent beings have an intelligent designer. Oh dear, I can't wait to get you out of this class fast enough if you're talking like that. I believed it long before this class, Joe. There's too much variety in life for it to have all sprang into existence by chance. Something or someone had a hand in it all, and I think Ober has an idea. As they neared the campus of Maiden Inyandana University, Solomon lowered his hovercar neatly into a parking space, and the two exited the vehicle for the campus's main building. Entering into the lobby, Joanna asked, why did your discharge psychologist refer you to Ober's class? I was having trouble adapting to normal life after the war. Seeing so many Aleutians ripping open humans with their bare hands and humans gunning them down en masse had me terribly depressed. I started dwelling on the meaning of life during my sessions with the shrink, so she searched the nearest university and referred me to Ober's class. Her rationale was that if I looked at the big picture, perhaps I could find my small place in all of it. That's one big picture. Observing the whole universe since its beginning to its ultimate end doesn't seem like the ideal way of grounding oneself. You have no idea how much it's helped. I never once thought of war as I studied stellar evolution, the creation of solar systems, and the evolution of life. On such a large time scale, humanity's presence is minuscule at best, and the wars we fought, the empires that came and went, made me feel that what I experienced will fade away with time. Think about all the dictators who wanted to rule Earth, only for it to be devastated by a supervolcano, which would have been completely out of their control. With so little time as the human lifespan, it's best to live life with few regrets and find something that makes one happy. He turned and walked backwards, facing Joe. Like love, family, friends, or a job you enjoy, because one day your life will end and even the memory of our most immortal heroes will be forgotten. Sounds more likely to drive a person towards nihilism, but I'm glad it's giving you a more optimistic outlook. They approached the classroom door where Joanna found lettering on the shielded white doorway spelling out Sa Alober's name. The shield disappeared when Solomon placed his hand upon it, and they entered the classroom to find Ober's lecture already in progress. Professor Ober was at least 8 feet tall, medium build, milk white skin with giant orange splotches, and long double-jointed fingers and feet. His eyes were fully circular and with gray irises, 2 slits for nostrils, and a small mouth. His back had a pronounced arch, and his legs bowed backwards at the knee. Joanna had never seen such a distinctive alien, and she struggled to pay attention to his lecture because she was fascinated with his body's movements. Ober darkened the room and activated a projector that turned his auditorium into a planetarium of the Phaeomim system, but zoomed out to encompass the entire universe. The projector cast the five fates in the following order: the Big Bounce segmented further into the Big Bang, and the Big Crunch, the Big Freeze, the Big Rip, the Multiverse, and the Grand Universe. Ober resumed his lecture once they sat and said, "The five fates of universal eschatology are theories some believe will await the known universe. The universe is ever expanding with galaxies accelerating away from each other. Some scientists fear that if this expansion continues, our universe will exhaust the required fuel for stellar formation and the existing stars will eventually form black holes. The projector animated the universe expanding and slowly showed stars being snuffed out and the galaxy fading away into sheer cold darkness." Ober continued, "These black holes will dissipate over billions of years, leaving the universe a cold, empty void. This outcome has been called the Big Freeze. Other enlightened minds believe the universe will eventually collapse under the weight of gravity, reforming into a small singularity. This is known as the Big Crunch. The projector showed the universe quickly relighting with all its stars and expanding until it reached a critical mass and collapsed rapidly into a comparatively small dot. That dot exploded and expanded once more into the universe, filling the classroom with starry lights." Ober said, "But scientists also believe the universe began as one massive singularity that burst forth into a Big Bang, creating the current universe. If the Big Bang and Big Crunch continue in this repeated fashion, then this model is described as a Big Bounce. Another alternative is the Big Rip theory that posits enough dark energy will build until all matter unbinds itself into unattached particles, essentially ripping apart the known universe. The projector showed the universe ripping until particles were just flying around, broken and formless." Ober said, "Finally are the ideas of the grand design and multiverses. The multiverse theory accepts the notion that some parts of space continue to expand independent of the original universe. When the original universe meets its end through the aforementioned ways, the independent universe continues on, possibly creating more universes of its own. This could be possible through black holes and giving credence to the Big Bounce theory. After all, if immense mass goes inside, where does it explode out? The projector showed the original universe and several black holes exploding into new universes from the original, creating a multiverse of ever-expanding multiverses. A student raised their hand and said, "So you're suggesting that every black hole in our universe could be the Big Bang of another?" "Yes, or it could be its own universe right in and of itself." "But what happens when those black holes evaporate? Will they destroy that universe?" "Possibly, or maybe what we see as a black hole evaporation is just that gateway to that universe closing forever, and that pocket universe operating independently on its own or linking to new or prior universes," said Ober. The student said, "But there are billions of black holes all over the universe, including one at the heart of our own galaxy." "There is, and don't you see that that's the miracle of the universe? It's possibly an endless cycle of death and rebirth, or alternate realities and of new possibilities." A male human student said, "If matter is neither created nor destroyed, but just changing states, then rearranging itself into new universes and realities makes sense in a way." "This is just beyond me," said a female Theosian student. Joanna leaned into Solomon and said, "What she means is this is utter bullshit." Solomon sighed and said, "I thought you'd be smart enough to appreciate this lecture." Ober continued, "What may seem overwhelming to some might be an expected outcome not above one's control to others. That is, if you subscribe to the grand design theory, which requires something even more remarkable. Grand designers believe that with enough time, scientific knowledge, and pure evolutionary luck, and ancient hyper-advanced civilizations could survive long enough to master the physical forces and affect a desired outcome for the universe, perhaps even the multiverse as a whole." There was audible grumbling at this statement, which many people dismissed as pure folly, with Joanna rolling her eyes at the absurd notion. Ober said, yes, it is a difficult theory to accept, but think about it. Say after the Big Bang of any universe, ours and not ours or not, a very young star evolved, one of the first, perhaps the first, and planets accreted and formed with it. Say life began on this planet early on, and that young civilization evolved much like any race in known galactic space. Say they were hardy and intelligent enough to avoid or survive any extinction level events and mastered space flight. Say they colonized every other habitable planet in their solar system before mastering interstellar flight, much like the human race. Then, over time, they mastered the physical forces further, achieving intergalactic travel, leaping beyond their aging galaxy to younger, more distant galaxies. If they continued to develop along these lines, could that hyper civilization have mastered the ability to manipulate the universe itself? Quiet settled over the room as the Phoeosians pondered this statement, and many shrugged their shoulders in agreement that anything was possible if given enough time, intelligence, and luck. A Phoeosian student answered Ober, saying, we would have seen or heard something from them like we eventually heard from humanity. Possibly. But what if this civilization doesn't want to make contact or is allowing lower civilizations to thrive without their influence? What if this civilization is all around you, yet they've taken great care so that you can't perceive them? What if you're one of them, Professor Ober, said Joanna abruptly, much to Solomon and the class's surprise. She continued, I've never seen an alien like you before. Who's to say you're not talking about your own kind? Ah, but here I am teaching at a university, so I can't be imperceptible or aloof since I can be challenged in my own classroom, said Ober. Or maybe you've taken a form to allow us lower species a peek at your limitless potential, said Joanna with a touch of sarcasm. Solomon nudged her to be respectful, and Ober saw it. But he simply smiled and said, I'm alien to you, but that doesn't mean you should flatter me simply because I teach at one of the finest institutions of higher learning on Harvest. My race is all but extinct. We didn't survive long enough to evolve into a race that could decide its own fate, and that's what the next topic concerns. The levels of advancement a civilization must achieve to affect the desired outcome of universal eschatology, said Ober. Joanna was impressed how he segued nicely from her skeptical outburst back to his overall lecture. Ober said, most scientists have come to a consensus on what achievements must be met for an alien race to become a member of the alien heads of state aboard the Coma space station. I'll show you the guidelines. He shut off the projector and changed the whiteboard screen to show several bulletins that had different descriptions of alien civilizations. The first screen listed primitive civilizations, which according to the statistics encapsulated most of the Milky Way's known worlds and species. The apex technological advancement of the primitive civilizations was orbital spaceflight, which humanity fit nicely into only a century before. Primitive civilizations still burned fossil fuels, harnessed limited stellar energy, and were at high risk for extinction due to their inability to colonize nearby planets. The Phoeosian race was still listed under this classification. Ober explained all this and added, primitive civilizations are also easily dominated by higher races, but will likely be left alone by higher societies for their relative uselessness. Unless the higher societies required a slave force or their planet's resources, invasion and first contact is highly unlikely. Thus, the alien heads of states never admits any primitive species to their governmental body and leaves them under protection of any higher civilization that wishes to include them in their sphere of influence. Ober changed the screen, which displayed the power civilization that describes only a handful of societies that were considered the bulk of the alien heads of state council. Power civilizations had managed interstellar flight and communication, avoided planetary and solar system extinction by colonizing extrasolar planets, and had begun to educate, subvert, or assimilate primitive civilizations within their sphere of influence. Under this description, humanity qualified as a power civilization. Power civilizations consist of three-member alien heads of states councils, which consist of the Luxemurian, Erebian, and human races, in addition to the Obsidian race. Since the Obsidians are considered a galactic threat and have never attempted peaceful discourse with the AHS, they will likely remain a fringe species for the foreseeable future. Isolation from the larger galactic community still doesn't change their status as a power race, and we must be careful when venturing into any planetary system they've claimed, said Ober. Listed next was the Imperial civilizations, which were considered an automatic threat to galactic security that would render the AHS defenseless against them. According to the AHS, there was only one Imperial civilization that had the power to effect galaxy-wide control and could quite easily subvert the power in primitive civilizations. Humanity and other power races knew that this lone Imperial civilization was entirely responsible for their ascendancy from the primitive ranking. However, no one had ever encountered this Imperial race, and the power races wondered why they were strangely absent from the galactic community. Ober said, the AHS acknowledges only one Imperial civilization that has uplifted the power races to their current standing by sending derelict spacecrafts adrift into their star systems. But the primitive societies should not be resentful of the power races, since they deserve credit for being able to decipher the technology of the Imperials to advance their societies. Whoever the Imperials are, they will certainly make their civilization known before long, and when they assume control of the galaxy, the question is, will we be ready to submit to their rule, because it's likely that we'll be unable to resist them. Despite Ober's dire warning of the powerful Imperials, the AHS still described two more hyper-advanced civilizations, Universals and Luminaries. Ober described the Universals as hypothetical civilization that conquered the known universe and were now its master race, yet their immense power was still limited to their particular universe and subject to universal eschatology, even if they decided their universe's fate. The Luminaries, on the other hand, were described as completely unshackled and masters of the multiverse, whose societal advancements made them indistinguishable from literal gods. At this, Solomon looked to Joanna in utter awe, but she wasn't impressed. In fact, she was quite bored with Ober's imaginary, all-powerful ancient civilizations, and was certain his class was a waste of Solomon's time. Should a species strive for luminary status? Should they conquer and subvert primitive species to do it? These questions give rise to one basic question. What is a race's ultimate goal for space exploration? I know many Theosians admire the human race for bringing their technologies to this planet, and many wish to emulate their exploratory spirit, but this was done in desperation due to Earth's sudden inhospitality. They fled into the stars without a larger purpose other than finding a new abode until they could return home. What I'm asking all of you is to consider a future where there are no new worlds to colonize, where every planet is barren and cold, where every star has run out of fuel, and when even the most distant galaxies offer no safe haven. Should your species accept their fate and die leaving no memory of their society, or should your species try to live eternally through manipulation of the five fates? I want you to consider these outcomes and explain which course of action you take in a 20-page research paper due at the end of the week, Ober said to much grumbling. He said with a smile, I look forward to reading your responses. Class dismissed. As the class of human and Theosian students rose to exit, Solomon whispered to Joanna, I want you to speak with him about what you read. If you say he's a fanatic, then I'll keep my promise. Deal, said Joanna. After the last student left, Professor Ober saw Solomon and Joanna sitting in his auditorium and said, I see you brought a friend to my lecture, Mr. Caldone, and a vocal one. Participation is always good to an instructor, even if it's of a cynical nature. I'm particularly interested in reading your views on humanity's solution to the questions I put forth. You wouldn't happen to have an idea now, would you? Solomon said, the odds are long for humanity to reach luminary status, but I don't see any species willingly dying out. I think my brilliant friend Joanna might have a better solution to your question. She read your textbook and has her own theories. Prophet Ober moved forward and shook her hand, saying, I believe that humans say, pleased to meet you when making acquaintances. Pleased to meet you, Joanna. What? Lavelle, she said. That's a famous name among your race, isn't it? Solomon? Is this the Joanna Lovell descended from the famous Theodore Lovell that discovered the alien spacecraft drifting through the solar system? She's Theodore's granddaughter, said Solomon proudly. So your family helped preserve humankind. You've read my book and you heard my lecture. What do you think humanity's goals should be concerning the five fates? Said Ober. I don't think humanity should be concerned with the end times on a universal scale. Our lifetimes are short enough as it is, and the galaxy is a hard place to live. That's where our focus should be, surviving in the here and now, said Joanna. Ober said, time is a funny thing, Joanna. What may seem like it'll never come to pass may come suddenly like a thief in the night. No one could have foreseen Earth's devastation, but luckily your grandfather kept his eyes on the stars, which helped humanity escape extinction. I like to think that someone with your family history would at least consider humanity's ultimate fate amongst the stars. And I like to think this class wasn't a waste of time, but it was. I'll see you outside, Solomon. Better hurry back to your car before I take off in it, now that I can drive it, said Joanna. Solomon was shocked at his friend's rudeness and said to Ober, sorry for that. Joanna's always been a bit of a wild card. Some days she's very cooperative, and other times she's very standoffish, but she did read our textbook cover to cover, so I'm sure she has a theory. I'll try and get her opinion, and I'll have my report in by the end of the week. Since she isn't my student and doesn't seem keen on returning for another lecture, feel free to include her opinion. But make sure you distinguish between your views and hers. I'm particularly interested in hearing your opinion, said Ober. Solomon left the classroom and hurried back to his hover car where Joanna was once again sitting in the passenger side waiting for him. Solomon raised the door, sat down, and closed it before buckling in. He started the engines and they flew off campus. He said, so what was with the unwarranted attitude you gave Ober back there? Unwarranted? Solomon, we were listening to an alien lecture us on how species should adapt to a future apocalypse. You're a veteran who needs to be figuring out how he'll live his life on Harvest. Instead of universal eschatology, what your discharged psychologist should have done is treat you at his facility for post-traumatic stress and set you up some interviews in a relatively stress-free industries, said Joanna. Ober's class has helped me live a better life, and I wish you'd understand that. And for your information, my psychologist did help me with a job. You're working where? Said Joanna, surprised. Over at Mayim Farms. I do some simple gardening and pottery making for them to calm my anxiety and depression, said Solomon. You've got anxiety and depression along with PTSD too? Said Joanna. A lot of Aleutian war vets do. Aside from the horrors of war, the Aleutian homeworld wasn't exactly a world with a ton of sunlight. Udoma's dreary gray skies killed more soldiers than the Aleutian warriors. I have nightmares where I'm just staring at those gray clouds. But once the shooting and explosions started, it triggered you. Feeling the warmth of Harvest Suns after a 3-year tour instantly lifted my spirits. I'll probably get a better job after I spend a few more months in the sun. And what about Ober's class? Are you going to drop out like you promised, said Joanna? That class helped me, but I do have a 20-page paper due at the end of the week. Now would be a good time to call it quits, Solomon chuckled dispiritedly. Joanna was suspicious and said, why do I get the feeling that you're a bit excited to do his research paper? I think it's kind of interesting. Which one of the 5 fates would you choose to save humanity? Said Solomon curiously with a tinge of excitement. Put Ober's lecture out of your mind since you promised you'd never return to his class. Focus on driving me to the grocery store and then back to my house where you can think of us eating dinner, drinking beer in my whirlpool while watching a couple of movies. That's how I plan on spending the rest of my evening. Would you believe I was thinking the same thing, said Solomon as they headed to the nearest grocer in Joe's neighborhood. Oh. 30 minutes later, they were outside on the patio with Solomon grilling several Baharian steaks made from the Phaeocian Rathasaur, which is a animal equivalent to an earth cow, and Joanna making a fruit and nut salad from harvest produce. After drinking their beers and eating their dinner, the two watched only one movie in Joanna's hot tub, which was an interspecies love story about a human and Phaeocian falling in love amidst first contact on harvest. Although no wars were fought during this period, there was much unrest, violence, and a fear of spacefaring aliens coming to barter technology for a new homeworld. Many people were killed in the early days, but overall humanity managed to settle in relatively peacefully, considering some of the other stories of the human diaspora. Joanna felt all warm and fuzzy from the sheer love the on-screen couple felt for each other, while Solomon had fallen asleep only minutes in as the alcohol and warm water settled his mind from the war trauma he suffered. He awoke mid-film after a nightmare of an Inusian warrior ripping through a man's chest coincided with the sounds of a battle scene in the film that had him screaming and shaking. Joanna struggled to comfort him, but after he calmed down, Solomon left the water and went inside her house. She watched him from the pool rim and remembered her Phaeocian friend Ashira gave her seeds for the Phaeocian sapio sage flower growing in her garden. Its amber pollen had been found to have a therapeutic but also aphrodisiac properties, which had it classified as a low-level controlled substance. Typically, the pollen was snorted or smoked, which made Solomon liken it to the illegal drugs many of his fellow vets had become hopelessly addicted to and refused to use it. Joanna mentioned Solomon's objections to Ashira, who told her to prepare it as a tea instead. Having used the pollen in this way for her menstrual cramps, Joe plucked the plant for Solomon. Entering into the home, she found Solomon sitting cross-legged on a rug before her electric fireplace, and the holographic flames dancing as the heater sent out its warmth. He saw the plant in her hand and said, "Is that the flower Ashira gave you?" Joanna said, "Yes." Solomon said, "How is she these days?" Joanna said, "I haven't seen her since we all returned here from Udoma." Solomon said, "She has a wall of honors at the university." Joanna said, "Yes, Tetra had paid for her education, employed her right after graduation. After the war, she worked at the headquarters for 4 months before they sent her off-world, somewhere in the Sol system. I haven't heard from her since." Joanna filled up a kettle with warm water, filled 2 empty tea bags with the pollen, and left them hanging from 2 mugs. As the water boiled, Joanna moved over to Solomon and saw him with his arms holding up his head, reading Professor Ober's book. Disappointed but unwilling to disturb his peace, she knelt before the heater after realizing her house was a little cool. Solomon saw her watching him read and said, "It relaxes me, spacing out and thinking of distant times. While grilling our steaks, I decided on the fate I'd choose for the universe." "Which fate is that?" said Joanna, genuinely intrigued. You'll know which one and why after you edit my research paper. I've always been so bad at writing." Joanna said softly, "What's there to research? Why trouble yourself with these distant fantasies that you or I could never hope to affect even in 1,000 lifetimes?" Solomon said, "The research would be based on your grandfather. What would have happened if we hadn't captured that ship? What's the society willing to do to break new ground in science? Look how it's made us stronger, smarter, and kept us alive. I'm going to break my promise to you. I'm not leaving the class. I need it. It's the only thing that makes me feel at peace outside of work." The tea kettle began whistling, and Joanna thought that maybe she had something that could help him feel at peace without quack science. In order to bribe him into acquiescence, Joanna said, "I'll tell you what. You come outside and finish the movie with me, and I'll help you write the paper. What do you say?" Solomon said, "Sure." Joanna removed the tea kettle from the stove, poured the water into the 2 mugs, and stirred in a bit of honey to mask the pollen's bitterness. The two then returned outside and sipped their tea, not returning to the pool, but their hot beverage kept them warm outside the hot water. Standing by the pool chairs, Joanna looked at Solomon slyly after he finished his beverage fast and continued to watch the movie attentively that quickly turned into a sedated contentment. Joanna herself also watched attentively before she could feel the pollen taking effect and nudge her closer to a weary, warm peace. As the movie grew near its conclusion, both she and Solomon were completely engrossed by the conflict the two lovers faced and their blossoming love for each other during their struggle. The film closed on the pair's honeymoon and their first night together, which had Joanna weeping. She had forgotten how lonely she'd been in her big new mansion and made her rethink what's important in life like Solomon. Her tireless contracting jobs made her something of a workaholic, and she realized just how much of her life had begun to slip past her. At 29, she wondered if her best years were getting away from her to find love, much like the human Phaeocian couple in the film. She considered how she'd spend her life seeking revenge for a decades-old affront, or as a content wife and impossible mother. Revenge won out as she realized many of her troubles wouldn't have been her troubles had her grandfather been given his due. With a tinge of bitterness in her heart, the Wilshire family With a tinge of bitterness in her heart towards the Wilshire family, she looked to Solomon and pitied his choice to join the war that brought him such mental anguish. He sat now watching the film's credit, listening to the closing love song. Solomon turned to see her studying him and saw the moonlight on her face. He grew rather warm from her beautiful gaze, which she turned away immediately when he saw her. But it was enough to send his heart a-fluttering. He thought it was the movie's moving final scene and the love song that played during the credits that made him feel so passionate about his childhood friend. In truth, it was Joanna's tea, but it gave Solomon the courage to ask her to dance. Thinking of the movie, her life, Solomon's desire to impress her during the war, and under the influence of her own tea, Joanna accepted his offer. She stood and they swayed to the song from the film, with both finding each other noticeably more attractive under the moonlight. Her senses were more attuned to the texture of his skin, and she rubbed his toned, muscled arms before moving them around his neck. Solomon was surprised she was so welcoming tonight, and he loved the way she smiled, and gazed back at him with her green eyes. Having never been this close to her, it was only now that he noticed her eyes had a faint red tinge about the pupil. But this wasn't the time to ask about it as he leaned in for a kiss. Surprisingly, she didn't resist and kissed him passionately and for a long time, until the extraordinarily bright light illuminated the night sky and shone brighter than the moon. This bright light snapped Joanna back into reality as she breathed deep and turned her eyes skyward, where she saw a single star brightening. Her eyes weren't damaged as she continued to stare at the sight. Solomon covered his eyes and followed her gaze to the same star, wondering what interrupted the best moment of his life. He wondered why the star was growing and luminous, and asked Joanna if she knew what it could be. Joanna said, "A supernova." Solomon said, "An exploding star. Wow, I never thought they'd be so bright. Then again, I never thought I'd see one. What a lucky sight." For some reason, Joanna felt an odd sense of dread emerging from her amorous mood. But not wanting to kill it entirely, she said, "Yes, a lucky sight indeed." Sorry for the interruptions in my speech and inability to read it clearly. But this was Chapter 2, Universal Eschatology in Solar Nemesis Alpha. This is my science fiction book. I am currently working on Solar Nemesis Delta, which is book 2, and I'm halfway through that, actually a little over half, but I won't be talking about that anytime soon. Chapter 3 is Computer Cryptanalysis. So I'm thinking about reading that. I will consider that in just a moment as I'm sitting here, so we shall see what happens. Once again, my name is author J.A. Freeman or Justin Freeman. You can buy The Ghost of Amalgam, The Linking Tomb on Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com. This book, Solar Nemesis Alpha, hasn't been self-published, but I am looking for a publisher. So please give me a chance. If you know of anybody who is looking to work with a new and undiscovered artist, please give me a shout out on my YouTube page. My email address is up there. And my email address is theghostofAmalgam@gmail.com. Thank you very much.